Leafs Converts Hockey World, how are you? This is the Leafs Convo podcast. I'm Norman James. It is great to be with you. We have a terrific episode in store, or at least I think it's terrific. I'll let you be the judge as to whether it is or not. What is terrific for sure, the Maple Leafs on the West Coast right now, 2-0 with wins over the Kings and the Sharks, looking to make it a perfect 3-0 against the Ducks. Can they do it? I don't think they will. I know they might. So what say the one and only, the legend, the omniscient one, Michael Piaggello? We'll find out what he thinks about the Leafs and their play, a plus 18 on the season, right there with the elite in the NHL. That's where they should be, right? We'll also talk about William Nylander, the contractual impasse with the Maple Leafs, potentially coming to a head with December just around the corner. Nazem Kadri throwing hooks, Mitch Marner going top shelf on primary assist from the goaltender. There's so much to get into, so why don't we do it? Mike's ready to go. I'm ready to go. I know you are too. So what do you say? Let's pod. The Leafs Convo starts right now. And I'm pleased to be joined by my podcast partner in crime, Mike Augello. Hello, sir.
Good afternoon, Norman. How are you?
Not too bad. I didn't get a chance to watch the Leafs Sharks from San Jose live because I was sleeping. So I caught up on the highlights this morning. And man, I was as pleased as punch, still feeling that way. The Leafs winning 5-3, outshot by the Sharks, but who cares? Tavares scored. Freddie Anderson gets a primary assist on a Mitch Marner beauty. Nazem Kadri punching people in the head. I loved it.
Yeah, it was an entertaining game, and I'm a night person, so I was able, and I didn't have to get up early, so I didn't have to. I could survive and get through that, and honestly, it was tough on Tuesday when they played LA, being up 5-1. I started to drift off in the middle of the third period, but this game was pretty exciting. More emotional, and you mentioned Kadri, more emotional because apparently the Sharks were still incensed about Kadri pulling part of Joe Thornton's beard off in a fight last year, and guys like Barclay Goodrow and Melker Karlsson and Timo Meier and Evander Kane were taking runs at him, and he was giving back as good as he was getting. So it was an entertaining game, and the Leafs win now 2 games in California and have a chance to sweep the West Coast against the Anaheim Ducks tonight.
You know how it is in California. It's all about the look. It's all about how you represent. And Joe Thornton and his beard, just absolutely legendary. It used to be the crazy locks when he came out of St. Thomas via Sault Ste. Marie and then into Boston. Now it's all about the beard. And how could they ever forget that Nazem Kadri was yanking at that beautiful thing last year? And Kadri, he remarked after the game, you still have that seething feeling from the things that happened a year prior. You're not going to be able to let that go, turn the page and move on and try to win a hockey game. And that's going to disrupt you and take your attention away from the task at hand. And that is trying to skate with one of the fastest, most elite teams in the NHL. Go ahead. It's only at your peril.
Well, I have to say early in the game, the Leafs get out to that early lead, and then San Jose comes right back on a sort of weird goal where it comes off the corner and goes off the side of the net and gets past Freddie Anderson, who didn't even know the puck was there. It was 1-1, 2-1 Leafs. Then San Jose comes back, and then San Jose takes the lead. And there was some questionable defense on the part of Morgan Rielly and Ron Hainsey. But around the middle of the second period, the Leafs just sort of took over. I think it was their speed, especially Kasperi Kapanen, who, the whole stretch pass thing that the Leafs have been doing for a while. When you have a world-class speedster like Kapanen flying out there, unable to, I think, stretch the defense, it does make a lot of difference. And he was great last night with 2 goals. But just getting back to Kadri for a second, that plays into Kadri's bailiwick. It's basically, if he annoys you enough, he's taking you off of your game. And I think you could see that, especially late in the game when I think the outcome was already determined. That's when Karlsson and him were fencing behind the net, and Karlsson gave him a swing, and Kadri gave him one back, and then threw a stick into the corner. I mean, it was good theater. But San Jose, if they could play it over again, I think they would emphasize less on getting Kadri and emphasize more on actually winning the game.
I loved it. This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James with Mike Augello. We'd like to welcome David Nestico, superstar gift maker to the Leafs Convo fold. He made his debut with the Convo last night during the Sharks and Leafs from San Jose. Nazem Kadri, I mean, there are people out there who don't like anything that has to do with anything physical. And don't you worry, the Leafs are not in the top 10 and taking penalties. And they're, they're not the biggest team in the league. They don't hit too many. So, yeah, if you're looking for just skill and finesse and not a lot of the rough stuff, the Leafs are producing for you. However, Nazem Kadri is kind of a guy who can play the skill speed game, but also mix it up too. How essential, Mike, do you think Nazem Kadri is to this team? The guy serves the purpose of the overall general team dynamic, but he brings something extra that no one else does.
Well, I think that the idea of them trading Kadri or any kind of transaction involving Kadri is never going to happen. And, remember a few years ago when he was sort of inconsistent defensively, inept at times, I was all for, saying, okay, let's get a change of scenery here. He's clearly not going to work here. Babcock comes in, he straightens him out. He's playing much more responsible defensively. He's using that antagonizing, annoying quality to the benefit of the Leafs. And, last night again was an example of that. The main factor here is with Austin Matthews probably going to make over $12 million a year, with John Tavares making $11 million a year. You got a number 3 center who on most teams will be a number 2 making $4.5 million. He's not going anywhere. So, I mean, I think he's an essential part of this team for more than one reason. And I think the biggest reason is there's very little pushback on this team, and Kadri represents most of it. So I think that before the trade deadline, the Leafs need to go out and maybe get another 1 or 2 players who can provide that pushback, because in a scenario against a Tampa Bay or a Boston or a Pittsburgh or Washington in the playoffs, those teams have grit and a little snarl. And I don't know if the Leafs do. And Kadri is the only one that does. And we saw last year when he got suspended for 3 games, it was tough to make up for that.
If you don't think the Leafs need a little bit of grit and snarl to get to the promised land, and that is to win the Stanley Cup, we're not here just to praise and laud and worship your favorite players with great hair and great metrics. The team wants to win the cup. Most fans want to win the cup, and that's what it's about. If you want to win the cup, the grit and the snarl is required come springtime. The Leafs are a plus 18 that is tops in the league with Nashville. 68 goals, 50 goals against. They are right there among the top teams in the league. 13-6. Their road record 8-1. After a little bit of a hiccup here in October, straightening them out a little bit, perhaps adding a dose of humility to their overall game. The Maple Leafs are playing the type of hockey that we're expecting the Maple Leafs to play. Mike, I see this and I'm thinking this is elite, but this could be even better.
Well, more importantly, they're 5-3 without Austin Matthews in the lineup. And I remember a lot of people saying, well, if they go 500 during the time Matthews is out, that's going to be, that's going to be acceptable. Well, they're 2 games over 500 and playing a struggling Anaheim team tonight. And that's a 3rd game in 4 nights. And I believe Garrett Sparks will be the starter. But, that's, even if they go 2-1 on the Pacific swing.
Are you chalking up a loss tonight because Sparks is in net?
Well, I mean, I'm sorry. He's played 3 games and 2 of them have been subpar. I would like to think that he would bounce back and play well, but you put him in the back-to-back situation. They get a win last night, and I think he needs to prove himself. And thus far, I mean, he has not made a believer out of me, even though I've seen Garrett Sparks for years with the Marlies and think he's a really good goaltender at the AHL level, but he still has not proven that he can be one at the NHL level. So I'm a skeptic until I'm proven otherwise. But, just to that point, I mean, the Leafs, they're, like I said, they're 5-3 without Matthews, and that's an accomplishment. And, he could be back at some time next week or maybe the week after. And that, if they can survive that with their main opponents in the Atlantic Division, namely Boston and Tampa, being without Andrei Vasilevsky, potentially Zdeno Chara, Charlie McAvoy, I mean, Andres Palat, they're out without a number of key players. This is an opportunity when the Leafs get Matthews back to make up some ground and put a little distance between them and those teams.
It's at David Nastico 200. He's a good cat. We appreciate having him on board. He's really talented, much more talented than you or I, Mike, and that's why we bring on talented, excellent people like David to carry the day for, coattail riders like yourself and myself. It's amazing what the Leafs can do without Austin Matthews and then the greatest player of all time, William Nylander. I was of the mindset that, look, you got to get something for this guy right now. Mm-hmm. Maybe they just let him sit.
I can look back at sort of ancient history in terms of an example of this situation. And I know it's been mentioned and talked about, but Mike Peca, when he was with the Sabres, and this was, around 99, 2000, after the Sabres had gotten to the Cup final, there was a holdout. It was a year-long holdout with Peca. And when he came back the next year after sitting out the entire year, he says, I can't play for this club. And he was traded. And the return, I believe, was like Steve Bernier and Tim Connolly. They did not get the value back for Peca that he was worth to the Sabres. And I think that in a similar vein, if Nylander sits out all year, he's going to play in the KHL. He could get hurt. There's no guarantee that he may not say, okay, well, I can play in Sweden or play in the KHL and not come back to the NHL. I mean, there's a lot of pitfalls with the just let him rot, let him sit situation. And I know that Pierre LeBrun came up with, and I didn't come up with something, but it is a possibility. After December 1st, he cannot play in the NHL because of the Peca situation. It was changed in the CBA that there was a deadline. If it passes December 1st, his rights can still be traded, and the Leafs could trade his rights before the February 25th trade deadline. A team that's not a playoff team would probably not mind to trade for Nylander, even though he can't play for them, because they wouldn't want him to affect their record in terms of the pursuit of Jack Hughes or something like that. So, I mean, that's a possibility, but it's sort of a long shot. I think it comes down to, obviously one of three options. Either he signs a contract, he gets traded, or he sits. And I think sitting for the entire year is the lowest of the three probabilities. I think it's basically even in terms of trade and in terms of sign, but I lean more towards trade, not because I think the Leafs are, hankering to do it. I lean more towards trade because I just don't think Nylander's camp is going to be in a compromised position. I think they want what they want, and if they don't get it from the Leafs, they'll get it from somebody else. But I don't think they're going to all of a sudden say, let's make a deal.
We are speculating here. I wonder how much Louis Gross and the puppet master Michael Nylander are in the ear of Kyle Dubas, suggesting through statistics that I'd assume they would use to suggest that William Nylander is better than Mitch Marner. The holdup here is the expectation from Camp Nylander that their guy is going to end up making less money than someone they believe is inferior to William. And there's just no way to reconcile that. Mitch Marner is going to become this pariah. He's going to become this guy who a lot of fans get upset with because they'll believe that he is the reason that William Nylander is not making the money that he should be with the Maple Leafs and not continue his career with the Maple Leafs because in their minds he is superior to Mitch Marner. Let's not make any mistake about this. This is about William Nylander versus Mitch Marner.
Well, yes, it is, but I think it's William Nylander versus William Nylander in a sense. It's like he has a record. He scored 60 points 2 years in a row. You have to use comparables based on what he has done in the NHL. And if you look at his comparables through the first 3 years of his ELC, you look at guys like Nick Ehlers and, to the higher end of the scale, David Pasternak, and those players are making, between 6 and 6.6 million. So you would think that the compromise would be in that range. Well, Nylander is 5 years away from being an unrestricted free agent. And if he wants a 6 or 7 year deal, apparently still asking in the $7.5 to $8 million range. And that's just something that is not possible for the Leafs because they have to pay Marner and they have to pay Matthews. And other teams, I've heard I've heard the argument from people I respect on the radio, on TV, saying there's no way that the Leafs can win a Nylander deal because they're giving up the best player in the deal. But that's not the point in this deal. The point is to get what you don't have. And if the Leafs can get a top four defenseman and they can get another forward back for Nylander, I think it's a win, even though Nylander might be the better player in the deal. And like if it's Brett Pesce, if it's Colton Parayko, if it's Brandon Montour, yeah, they're not as good as Nylander, but the Leafs have Tavares, have Matthews, have Marner, and they have enough offense. It's not a situation where, they're giving up this guy and they have nobody else that can score. That's the thing. The Leafs have plenty of players who can score. They just need more help in different areas.
This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James with Mike Augello. So when fans go on about William Nylander having to be on this team because he's statistically superior to Mitch Marner and just about everybody in the history of hockey. Well, hold on a sec, but this is statistical. This is what the metrics tell them. What is the human element of this guy who produces the numbers tell them? What does William Nylander? So all these numbers are great. What happens when he walks into the locker room? What happens to the dynamic? What happens to the friendships and the things that are fractured? Like these guys, they're young guys. If you think that there is no social element and there's no cohesion that is going to be challenged, you're nuts. You spend too much time on your Twitter account just yelling at people or chirping at people, and I'm yelling at people, but who you don't have any association with people in the flesh. There's more to it than that. These are not robots.
I'm not sure that the acrimony and the fitting back in is high on the list of the concerns of the Leafs. I think the numbers in terms of how they can fit all these players under the cap is the main concern. They know that they're facing a payday for Austin Matthews, and we know based on how he has played, even from the beginning of the season, but even more so since Matthews went down, how valuable Mitch Marner is. And it may not be possible to get Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews on 8-year deals like I wrote a couple weeks ago. And it might be a situation where they sign one of them to a 5-year deal, and then once Tavares' contract is a year away from being expired, they can afford to extend a Marner or a Matthews for another 8 years or another long-term deal. There's moves to be made in terms of the cap situation that Pridham and Dubas will handle. What I just think is that the reality is that the Leafs are an effective offensive machine without William Nylander. They will be more effective with him, but they're effective enough without him. But we know that they need to improve on defense. And that's why if Kyle Dubas gets an offer in a trade that is beneficial and equal to the value of Nylander, I think he'll do it. If he gets lowballed, then I don't think Kyle Dubas will do it. Then the possibility of him sitting out throughout the rest of the year, if they can't come to a deal, comes to fruition. But I think if they get anything, if they get a deal close to equal value or more than equal value, he will not play another game as a Maple Leaf.
For the Leafs part, it's about making the dollars work because they have a grand plan. They have a master plan. The team's goal is to win the Stanley Cup. William Nylander's goal is to make as much money as he possibly can for himself. But he's got to think about the scenarios that are presented to him in the immediate and what he's going to mortgage or bet or bank on potentially earning going forward, even if it risks losing out in the short term. What I am saying is that these guys are human beings. They are young. They're still in their formative professional years. If William Nylander was forced to take a deal through his agents, and is he the one making the call, or is it his father and his agent?
We don't know.
He didn't want to do it. And he comes back. Is he going to be the same player?
I believe, and this is a minority opinion, but I believe that the Maple Leafs are a better team with John Tavares and with what they can get for William Nylander in a fair trade, in a good trade, than John Tavares and William Nylander.
I believe the ship has sailed on William Nylander. It's just been too long. That's just the way it goes. And I know a lot of people are hoping that they sign him because they love him and they adore him and they love him. That's fine. We're also passionate. We care about what's going on. And where I'm at as a fan, I want to win the Stanley Cup. I want my team to win the Stanley Cup. That's it. I don't care about William Nylander getting paid. And I don't care about his bravado or his ego being satisfied to give him the sense that he is more superior to Mitch Marner because a couple of stats suggest that he is from last year. Win the Stanley Cup, and this is what the Maple Leafs have to do, is they have to take that asset and get as much back for that asset as they possibly can. And we've talked about this, Mike. You have an abundance in one area. Doesn't seem as bad lately, but you still have to bolster up the defense. And if you can take William Nylander and do that and throw in Jake Gardiner in for a good measure because he's not signing here anyway, and even if he was a candidate to be signed, there's no reason to have him back here because he's a redundant kind of player. Mike, a couple minutes left. Let's talk about Mitch Marner. What a goal he scored from Freddie Anderson, who got the primary assist.
I think that the number of people who thought that those two players were even is dwindling because, and then you can say it's recency bias because Nylander is not playing, and if he was playing,
whose fault is that?
I know, but I'm just saying that that could contribute to the situation, but I just thought it was clear from the second half of last season to now that Marner has been the more dominant of the two players. And last night, I think it was a goal and 2 assists, but the goal that he scored, the one that made it 5-3, is a superstar goal. I mean, it's the long bomb pass from the goalie. And then when Marner gets it and he cuts across the middle and lets go of this wrist shot. And if you look at the video that David posted, the thing that was the most amusing about it for Leaf fans is this look of absolute utter shock on Martin Jones. Like, did something just go by me? Because I don't think he saw it. I mean, obviously he didn't see it because it went by him like he was standing still, but it was just shocking how deft the move was at just inside the blue line, cutting across and then unleashing the wrist shot. I mean, he is a dominant player right now, and that duo, the dynamic duo of Tavares and Marner, have carried this team through the absence of Austin Matthews.
Mm-hmm. I've been on the Marner bandwagon since the London days. I obviously ran a sports department here in London, and I'm biased because he's from Ontario, and so am I. No, because he's a fantastic hockey player who plays bigger than he is and just produces all the time. It's ironic we're talking about Mitch Marner creeping in through the blue line and making a nice move and going kind of top shelf on Martin Jones when the guy who probably does that better than anybody else getting across the blue line down the wing and blasting it is William Nylander. And, you guys fantastic. Look, Mitch Marner there's just no quit with that guy ever. And he's just a good player. The stats are one thing, but he just turns it on and he just goes.
Last night, and we have to keep our eye on this the next couple weeks before the December 1st signing deadline. There were two Leaf scouts in Philadelphia watching the Flyers Devils game, and the Flyers have been up and down recently. And if you look at their roster, they have an excess of defense. And last night they got shut out by the worst road team in the NHL, namely the New Jersey Devils. I know that I had been told previously that the Flyers might not be in on Nylander. I think if there are scouts there, there's still possibility that they're one of a number of teams. So I'm not saying it's a definite. I have no idea. Nobody has any idea where he's going to go or if he's going to go. But I think Philadelphia is one of maybe 5 or 6 teams that you could see Nylander traded to, but it's hardly a guarantee.
William Nylander going somewhere else is going to haunt the Maple Leafs and a certain portion of the fan base for a long time. The Leafs could win 3 cups without him if he does something great, wins a scoring title, an Art Ross, Rocket Richard, scores a nice goal. It's going to haunt the Leafs. There are going to be those people who think that William Nylander is the greatest Maple Leaf of all time and needs to be paid accordingly. As I've said before, I love the Maple Leafs more than individual Leafs, and I think it's important in this day and age of idolizing players and pitting one player against the next on a same team on the same team, or disrespecting a certain portion of the same fan base that you're a part of because they don't believe in what you believe in. That the end goal for all of us should be to support a team in a way to have that team understand that the goal is not just to pay your favorite player, but to win the Stanley Cup, Mike. And oh, by the way, the goal that Mitch Marner scored in San Jose, nothing compared to the 500 Matt Sundin scored on Mika Kiprusoff back in 2006.
Brother, you had to get that in under the wire, didn't you?
I had to get it in. Michael, take it easy, buddy. Gotta go.
Thanks, Norman.
That's a wrap for this edition of the Leafs Convo podcast. As always, thank you so much for listening. We want to hear what you think of what we are doing. At Norman James TLC, at Mike and Buffalo on Twitter. You can also holler at us in the Leafs Convo YouTube comment section. Just so you know, we are now on Spreaker and Castro. We're adding more podcast platforms literally by the week. So subscribe to us on the platform of your choice. And of course, come back to YouTube for the Leafs Convo podcast and so much more. For Mike Augello, I'm Norman James. We'll talk to you soon. The Leafs Convo is out.